later if you'd like. But right now, let's close our eyes and take a moment as we move more consciously now into the present moment and more consciously connect to the divine feminine presence that is the source of all life. Relax the shoulders, soften the face, drop and relax the tongue, and just let's gently breathe together the same breath that is miraculously breathing us all. A couple nice, slow, deep breaths here. Continuing with eyes closed for a quick metta prayer. Let your mind rest in the phrases. Repeat after me. May all beings be safe. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be happy. May all beings live with ease and well-being. Take one really big inhale here. Hold it for a second. Exhale slowly and open your eyes. I see Nina's on the phone, but I'll introduce her briefly. We are so excited to welcome Nina Rao on the theme of devotion and presence. Thank you, Nina, so much for offering to share stories of Sri Siddhi Ma and lead us in beautiful chanting to the mother. And thank you to all the women here tonight who will be sharing your Siddhi Ma stories and experiences. Please check out ninaraochant.com for more information about Nina. You can also access chant sheets there. And you can sign up to receive her email newsletter to learn about her upcoming events. And we'll put that link in the chat. So thank you so much gratitude.
Hi, everybody. I was actually on the phone with Shyama, who can't get into the meeting. Jackie, I texted you her number if you can call her or something, please. I didn't text you, I put it in the chat, into a direct message with you. Thank you so much. Okay. Hi. Nice to be with everybody. I feel extremely honored to have this opportunity to speak about Siddhi Ma. It's an interesting moment actually for me because I think I realized for so many years, we didn't really talk about her as she didn't want to be talked about, and she didn't want her photographs to be taken or shared. And so just those of us who spent time with her would talk about her, and the second last time that I saw her, I was talking to Jaya, who takes care of her, and she said, she handed me a photograph of Siddhi Ma, and she said, this particular photo, which some of you might have seen, and she said, share this with everybody, it's time. And I knew at that point that, she probably wasn't going to be in this realm with us for that much longer. So it's very interesting to continue to feel her presence. And since the topic of this talk today is devotion and presence, it's actually very easy to speak about Siddhi Ma in these terms because she was the model of devotion. There is no one else I know or have met in my life who is that as she is. She, every time you saw her, the image that Jackie shared for the event that you saw of her in her prayer, she was always prayerful and fully surrendered to her guru, who is Maharaji Neem Karoli Baba. And everything that she did, every single action, every word that she spoke, and I'm pretty sure every thought that she thought, invoked him. And she, in doing so, she was able to connect with us in such a way that she was able to guide us by hearing our hearts. And, I actually named my album Knower of All Hearts, Antaryami, for her. And it was because when meeting her, I understood that here was a being who actually understood my heart. And because she did, there was no words need to be spoken for me to understand that she trusted in me and I could trust my heart. It's a very difficult thing to actually convey. It's sort of a knowledge that arises from within. So what I thought I would just mention today, because some of you actually have never heard of Siddhi Ma, is my guess. I actually did a Google search for Siddhi Ma, and there's very little that comes up. And that, I'm sure, is intentional, because she kept herself so well hidden. And even when she was with Maharaji, serving him, she stayed with the Mas in the background. And he was the one who was out there with the devotees, but they knew everything that was going on. So just the little that I know of her history, which basically I read in the back of Divine Reality, if any of you have the book, The Divine Reality. If you don't have it, there's a free PDF on Krishna Das's website. So I'll just say that. And you'll be able to read about her and Maharaji as well. But she was born in Almora. Almora is a town up in the foothills of the Himalayas. And from there, on a clear day, you can have a beautiful view of the highest peaks of the Himalayas in northern India. Her father was Pyare Lal Shah, and her mother's name was Revati. It's said that when she was young, she was a beloved child. Everybody loved her. The kids loved her. The parents loved her. And some of her favorite pastimes were actually reading sacred texts, and particularly the Ramayana. And when I read that, I realized that so much of the time that she talked to me and gave me instruction, many of the verses came from the Ramayana. So she was living in that space all the time. When she was 6 years of age, she spent a lot of time with her mother, and she loved to go to temples. She asked to be taken to the temples where she would light lamps, the little oil lamps, and make an offering. They say that Maharaji actually visited her himself and gave her darshan when she was 7 years old. In her father's, he had a shop. I think might be a toy shop. And she had his darshan when she was 7. When she was also at that age, these towns in India, a lot of the saints would travel around in the Kumaon Hills at that time. And when she was young, she liked to visit saints with her mother. So she was already in that type of a family. And she went to see Anandamayi Ma. Some of you know who Anandamayi Ma is. Hold on. Here's a picture of her, if you can see her. It's when she was young. And she was sitting with some devotees in a satsang. And somebody was singing a Mirabai bhajan. And as they were singing, Siddhi Ma, as a young girl, got up and spontaneously started to dance. And when the singing was over, Anandamayi Ma is said to have gotten up and walked over to Siddhi Ma and pulled Siddhi Ma onto her lap. And she said, "Ye to Jagat ki maa hai," which means she is the mother of the universe. So this is coming from also the mother of the universe. She later did get married. She married a gentleman named Tullaram Shah, who was also a devotee of Maharaji, and they would often go for darshan. The first time that Ma went for darshan, they say that Maharaji immediately, when he saw her, started describing what her daily chores were like. Now, she hadn't seen him since she was a young girl, but he knew everything already. And he started talking about her and describing that while she was doing her daily chores, she was so fully absorbed in contemplation of God. That was her nature. And he said to her at that time, I will make a kuti for you in Vrindavan. So kuti is a little cottage. And that was very odd, they say, for him to say that to her at that moment, because she was newly married. So it's not something that you would say to a newly married woman, that you're making a home for her somewhere else. But also, there was no Vrindavan ashram at the time. So Maharaji was already seeing what was going to happen. So in the early 1940s, Maharaji ended up spending a lot of time up in the Kumaon Hills. And Siddhi Ma was living in the India Hotel in Nainital. And the India Hotel itself became a center of spiritual activity. They would be chanting the Ramayana. There was kirtan going on all the time. And it was also at that time Maharaji would stop in at the India Hotel and also give darshan to the people who were there. And Ma and her husband Tularam Shah also went on yatra with Maharaji to sacred places. Yatra means pilgrimage. When her husband died, Siddhi Ma left home and left her children. I think they were grown at that point, but in the care of other family. And she, along with Jivanti Ma, who was also a very deep devotee of Maharaji and became Siddhi Ma's constant companion, they went to live with Maharaji and they cared for him for over 40 years until he left the body. And just before he left the body, I'll tell you the story as we look at some images together. It was understood that she would then be taking care of the temples and Maharaji's devotees. And after he left the body, she was the well that people went to draw from, so that they could feel the love and assuage some of the grief that they felt when Maharaji left the body. She held that love for them. Many old devotees of Maharaji who I met and spoke to said this about her. And we were fortunate to have been able to have her darshan. Ambika and I went together for the first time to Kenchi in 1998. We had both met Krishna Das and, had this heart-opening experience. And certainly for me, I really wanted to try to find the source of it. And I was in despair that Maharaji had left his body, and Krishna Das was saying that, he was his guru, and how would I ever meet someone like this? So we ended up going to Kenchi, and my first feeling of Ma was the same thing that I felt when I chanted as a young girl with my grandfather. I have a memory of this opening up of presence. And when I heard Krishnadas, I had the same feeling. And when I met Siddhi Ma, the same thing happened. I walked into the room, and there was this space in which I was floating and I was a part of, and everyone was a part of. So this was what I understand and what I call as presence, something that feels near. We can't necessarily touch it because we are actually touching it. It's all around us. We are it. And when we're in the presence of these beings, we're reminded of this interconnectedness. So over the years, I definitely developed a relationship with Siddhi Ma, where the shape of the presence took her form. And while she attributed everything to Maharaji, it came to pass that in all the years that I spent with her, my refuge was at her feet and is at her feet still. We spent a lot of time just hanging out with her. She didn't really have any teachings, formal teachings to give in any way. She allowed us to be in the ashram, bring our children, bring our families, bring our friends. And then, when we asked about doing seva, she said the best seva that you can do is to sing the name. And so that is in fact what we did. We chanted Hanuman Chalisas in the mornings and in the evenings. We sat with the Kirtan Malas. And, she often said that the only practice that's going to work for us is the chanting of the divine names. It's the straightest path into our own hearts. And that she even said that this is actually a line from the Guru Stotram where they say, mantra moolam gurur vakyam, which is the root of the mantra, is the Guru's speech. And so everything she said took on, it just entered into my being. I hope. Who knows what she said to me that I wasn't able to absorb. I'm sure there was a lot. But I try to remember what she said, the instructions that she gave us. I was able to translate for her because I speak a little bit of Hindi. And so when the Westerners came, I had the opportunity to be there as she spoke to other people and as they had questions. And in doing so, I was able to hear the way in which that she saw things with such clarity and simplicity. She was so clear. She had full confidence about the state of what was happening at that moment. And whatever she said, there were few words. She didn't really say very much, but what she said was so clear that there was no doubt. And because she was so clear, it made it clearer for us as well. So I'm not going to say much more. There's so much more to say about our time with Ma, but I'd like to give other people time because really what she did for us was create satsang, which they say is the hallmark of a guru, is creating people who want to talk about Dharma, want to talk about the path. And by our connection with her, we're all connected to each other as well. She did that for us. She took us in her lap. She wrapped her anchal around us and has given us a refuge. So what I thought would be a nice thing to do, and Jackie, if you can do this, I've just pulled some images which you can probably find online, but I just kind of put them together into this little slideshow so that we can all have darshan of her. So Jackie will do a screen share, and I'll just say a few things about these images. So this, that's perfect.
Great.
So here she is with Maharaji. This is an old picture from the old days when she went to live with him. At this point, she was dressed in white always. And she always had this loving feeling. And at the same time, you could also find this expression on her face as Durga. This is how the people gathered around Maharaji. And during that time, the Ma's were not always sitting with him. Here's a nice image of her with Jivantima, with the glasses. That's Jivantima. Another beautiful image of Ma, taking care of Maharaji. She did everything for him. One of the things I noticed about Ma frequently was how in tune she was with the natural surroundings. She knew about weather. She knew how we should prepare for the weather, how we shouldn't be ill, what are the herbs that we should take. She loved to listen to birds. When she was tired of all the devotees who would come, Not that she was tired of them, but she needed to take a little break. She would go away for her own retreat. She would go into the forest. That was her favorite place to retreat to. This is another image of her with Jivanti Ma, and there with spiritual books. They love to listen to the chanting of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Ramayana, or the Sundarkand. And Ma did a lot of pilgrimages. She had been all over India to sacred places, from up in the mountains to the very southern tip of India to Rameshwaram. This is during Durga Puja. And often we would have darshan with her outside on the patio like this. This is one of Shyama's images of Ma with Jivanti Ma and Jaya in the back. Jaya is our elder guru sister who took care of Ma for many, many years. And this is a darshan room in Kenchi. Here she is on yatra in Orissa, where they probably went to Jagannath Puri, and they're on the ocean. One of my favorite images of her. Again in nature. And you recognize this fellow. We were all in Kenchi when Ramdas came to Kenchi after he had his stroke. This is a room up in Rishikesh temple where Jaya took a picture of all of us hanging out with her. This is Ganga and Yamuna, also known as Joanne and Marlene. Some of you might know them. Towards the later times in her life, she left her body in December 2017. You would often find her in that meditative state. In the early days, she talked a lot and told us stories of Maharaji, and she was very animated. And towards her later days in this body, she got very quiet. This is a great image of a function happening in the temple, and she's sitting in the chair and everybody's come for her darshan. You can see the joy. So the Indian devotees hanging out in Rishikesh, you can see the feet of Hanumanji there. These are the beautiful gardens in Rishikesh temple in the back, and the Tulsi garden is. Every place that she managed and kept spotless and clean and just perfect for practice, because she urged us to practice all the time. She urged us, she said, it really has to be something that you should develop a discipline for. So here she is with her journal, which she kept writing Ram till her last days. This was her last journal that I got a photograph of when I visited her home where she stayed at the end. When Maharaji was leaving Kenchi for the last time, the story goes that he, actually Ma told us the story herself, that Maharaji took the journal out, wrote September 9th, filled it with his Rams, wrote September 10th, which was going to be the next day, wrote more Rams because that was also his practice. And then he wrote September 11th, which was 1973. And he handed the notebook to her and he said, Ma, this is now going to be your work. And he left Kenchi and didn't come back. He left the body in Vrindavan. This is an image of Kenchi Devi that I wanted to share with you. This is the beautiful Durga that they say is actually modeled after Siddhi Ma. Maharaji actually said once when he was in Nainital at the Devi temple, when Ma was young and she was living at the India Hotel, he said, pointing to the India Hotel across the lake, he said, Katyayani, which is another name of Durga, she lives there. It is for her that Hanuman had to come. And they say that Maharaji was actually revealing his own identity when he said that, as Hanuman, and she as the goddess. So this is an image from the temple. This is Jaya. At the opening of the temple, there's a beautiful temple for her in Kenchi, as well as in Rishikesh. And this is one of my darshans with Uma, my daughter, and Ma in back rooms of Kenchi. And this is the photo that Jaya asked that I share with everybody when the time came. So, thank you so much. And I would like to invite my dear Guru sister Ambika to share a little of her thoughts and feelings, anything about Ma.
Hi. Thank you, Nina. I think I'm always surprised at how emotional I get when I see just so many pictures of Ma and tell stories. And I miss her in the body very much still. I miss that time with her. We were really lucky to be with her in that way. And when you were talking, Nina, I was about how she talked about chanting and practice. I was reminded of a little phrase she said to me about chanting, because she always asked us to chant, often the Hanuman Chalisa, but other chants and prayers as well. And she said that chanting is a really great practice because it brings you peace. When you are chanting these prayers, these mantras, it brings you peace. And when others hear you chanting, it brings them peace. So it's, kind of magnified like that. And I had thought of a story that's sort of a funny story, but also tells about how much it's a personal story, but it's sort of an example of how much she knew what was in our hearts and minds. I was in this ashram in the south with her for a while, and I had gone through quite a lot to get there and be with her. And when I was there with her, this is sort of a shortened version of the story, but when I was there with her, I was the only Westerner, so I had no one, and mostly people didn't speak English. A few did, but really, when I was there, it was just a few of us, and I was wanting so much time with her, and I got so much time with her, but also I was all day either chanting or doing prayer or doing some kind of seva, and so it was intense, right? And it was everything I wanted, and it was also really hard. My mind started to rebel, like I started to lose it, and then I felt really guilty about that. Like I felt like, what's wrong with you? Because you come here, you get everything you want, you asked for this, and you're with the mother of the universe, and you're not even happy. What's wrong with you, right? And so I had this kind of back and forth struggle, like with a lot of bliss being with her, and then a lot of pain in my mind as my mind was starting to rebel because of all the practice I was doing, right? Like there was a lot happening emotionally and mentally. And so after the being in the south with her at this small remote ashram, she said, I'll see you in Vrindavan, right? Like it was Jiao, time to go, Jiao, I'll meet you in Vrindavan, which was great because she often just Jiao'd me, and I had no idea how I was going to find her, right? So that was like a Leela that happened all the time. But this time she said, I'll be in Vrindavan, right? And so when I got to Vrindavan and she arrived with Jivanti Ma, and I would sit with her and we would have darshan, and every time I sat with her, she said, Ambika, how was your time in the South? She would ask me this question every single time I sat with her. How was your time in the South? And every single time I would say, oh Ma, it was so wonderful. What a boon, what an incredible satsang and blessings and all this, right? And I would say the same, so we would do this every day, same thing, every day. How was your time in the South? Oh, it was incredible. one day, I don't know what happened. This was one of the times she was in the back of the ashram in the garden. So something, and it was like afternoon, evening. There was something like loose about the moment. And like, I don't know, we were just a little more casual, and it was, the mood was really thick but light at the same time. I don't, that's a hard way to describe it, but it was like there was a heaviness there, like a real mysticism, but there was also this real lightness. Like we're just hanging out in the back, you know, and she said, she asked me, she said, "So Ambika, how was your time in the South?" And I said all the things I always said, how blissful and wonderful it was. And then I said, but also, Ma, it was really hard. And my mind was really like giving me a hard time, right? I don't remember exactly how I said it. But the moment I said that, she just started laughing, like cracked up laughing. Her and Jivanti Ma were just laughing and laughing and laughing. And I felt like relieved, like hugely relieved, also a little bit idiotic. And then, but we had this like amazing afternoon of like, I don't know, stories and like all kinds of just like the best party kind of thing, at like a really great spiritual party. And she never asked me that again. She never asked me how my time was in the South again after that. Like that was what she was waiting for. So that's my sharing this evening of Siddhi Ma. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ambika. I remember that time. Was Shyama able to join? Is she here? Or yes? Okay, good.
Here I am. So now I can't hear you though. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go right ahead.
Okay. So this is so sweet. What was I going to say? Well, you know, there's simultaneously everything you can say about Ma, and it's all beyond words. But thinking about kind of coming off of what Ambika was talking about and how she would know what was in your mind always. And not only what was in your mind, but what had happened, what you were doing, everything. I just remember, I remember one time I had an idea that I should be doing additional sadhana. And she had given me sadhana sometime before, probably several years before, to do, which I didn't always do. And anyway, so I asked her though in a darshan, I said, "Ma, is there something else I should do?" And she smiled and she said, 11 Hanuman Chalisas would be good, which is what she had given me. So she also had a great sense of humor. And I remember one time, I'll never forget this moment. It was in Kenchi in the darshan room. And it was one of those lucky times where you can kind of find a corner and stay. And a lot of people were coming in one at a time, all different devotees and families. And I was just sitting there, like quiet as a mouse. So happy to watch, you know, because then you see the joy on everyone's face. You hear even if you don't understand everything being said, it was very special. And there was one devotee who came in, and she was having to leave, and she was very sad and upset, and she was holding on to Ma. And Ma was telling her she had to leave. Actually, she had to finish the darshan, and she wouldn't leave, and she was holding on to Ma's foot, basically. And I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden, Ma turned to me and rolled her eyes like this. Oh, it was just too sweet. And then another man came in. This was right after, at the end of Durga Puja. And he came in with his family, and he had a whole basket of flowers, and he brought the flowers, and he basically he didn't dump them, he offered them, but he covered Ma in flowers. Like in the picture in the car, when you see all the flowers, she was covered in these flowers. And just at that moment, again, she turned to me, because I was sitting there, and it was just with this most radiant smile, and she was covered in flowers. That's actually what I'll never forget. That smile, and just her complete gorgeous radiance in that moment. I always felt, this is something I wanted to mention, I always felt extraordinarily happy after having her darshan. Like, for a reason, because I had her darshan, but not for an obvious reason. It wouldn't matter what was going on. For me anyway, I would leave, I remember walking out of darshans over and over again, just like so happy. And lately I've been noticing in the stories about Durga Devi that she gives happiness, and Ma gave happiness in that way, just to be with her. And Javanti Ma as well, I have to say. Great joy, both of them. And I had a feeling to tell one other story, which is another personal story, but has also to do with that she knows. And it had to do also, because I was noticing the topic tonight, devotion and presence, right? So I was thinking, well, for me, feeling presence elicits devotion. I feel that heart connection when I feel that presence, right? And I had something happened in Rishikesh one time, which is for me the biggest connection. I love the pictures as well, especially all of them. And I think it's just so helpful with any saint that you feel connected with, to find the thing that really helps you feel them, whatever it is. But this incident happened. So I had just arrived in Rishikesh, and there were some other Westerners there. And it was, many people were saying that Ma wasn't giving darshan yet. She was there in Rishikesh, but she wasn't seeing anyone. So also I had just arrived, so I had no thought of having a private darshan. It just wasn't on my radar at all. And she hadn't seen anybody. So anyway, I was sitting there in the back with some people, and someone came up to me, one of her assistants, and said, Ma's calling. I usually had a list when I thought I was going to see Ma, things I wanted to remember to ask and all sorts. I had nothing. I was completely like, okay. And I went up the back stairs there, which is the best feeling when you know you're about to see Ma. It's like, there's no better feeling. It's even better than seeing her, is knowing you're about to see her. I don't know, maybe not, but great feeling. And she was inside, so I walked in through the back door. And she was sitting in a chair, and Jaya was there. And we had a very, I pranammed, and she asked how I was and what my program was, and sort of nothing that seemed, I was waiting to see why I'd been called. And it was just a very sweet, not very long, maybe 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes. And then I was getting ready to leave, and Jaya went to get prasad, which she often did. And backstory is, I forgot to say this, I had arrived the day before, and when I unpacked my bag at the place I was staying, which is a little ashram on the Ganga, I realized I hadn't brought my sleeping bag. So I thought, well, I'll go in the market and get a blanket at the Ganga store, at the Gandhi store, Gandhi ashram store. So I wasn't worried about it, and I slept under all my shawls and I was fine. But that's the backstory. So anyhow, Jaya came back with this blanket to give me. And she said, Ma especially asked me to choose this blanket, give you this blanket. And that was the darshan. But the message that I got was she knew. And she always knows. And she still knows. But when I hold that blanket every day, it's the realest moment in my day. It's because I feel her protection and I feel her love. So that's the story I wanted to tell. And how lucky to be with her. Every single time was an incredible blessing, every moment. So somebody asked, I noticed, about KK and Ma. And I don't know if Nina wants to talk about that. But they were very close. They were relatives, actually. And so much sweetness and love between them. Yeah, I don't know what else to say except that there was a lot of love there. And their houses were very close. Anyway, that's enough from me. Jai Ma.
Thanks, Shyama. Mirabai? Is she there?
Yes,
Thank
here I
you.
am. So I'm mindful of a couple of things. One is the time that we have left, so I'm not going to take too long. And the other is that there are people gathered here this evening who have had very significant experience with Siddhi Ma and could speak much more authoritatively from your own experience about your relationship with her. And I wish that we could. So maybe we'll try to create another space for more open storytelling, because I happen to know, some of you I was with in Kenchi with Ma, and I wish that you could speak to. So I will keep this short, and it's very personal for me. And I think that, as they've all been this evening, but I think it's significant for all of us to know that I went to Ma with a completely broken heart, and she healed me, and it has lasted to this day. So that's what I want to say. I went on the 9th anniversary of my daughter's death. Jenny was killed in a car accident when she was 14. And right before Jenny died, well, for years before, but up until right before Jenny died, the two of us had always planned to go to India together, to go to Kenchi and be with her, be with Ma. And that was one of Jenny's lifelong dreams. We were saving money. I was a single mom. It was difficult. And so after she died, it just wasn't really possible, even though Ma reached out to me here in Taos. I live in proximity to the Hanuman temple here, Neem Kroli Baba Ashram. And so she knew about Jenny's death. She knew about all the ashram children and had reached out to me after Jenny died. But it took me a long time. It took me 9 years, which is a number of completion, to finally get there. And I was still quite broken, not every moment, but
but I still very much was. And I'm going to try to sum it up. I want to just read a little bit from this memoir that I wrote. Just two things to describe what it was like for me being with her. She was incredibly caring and totally unsentimental. That was my experience of Mataji. Utterly loving and completely unsentimental. So this is what it was like the first time I pranamed at her feet. It was the first day I was there. Here's what it was like. It was like becoming snow melt and flowing down a mountainside into a waiting lake. It was like meeting 10,000 years of Vedic history in my own body. It was like finding a cave in the snow where a fire is burning and a kettle of stew is simmering. It was ordinary and holy and utterly appropriate. Never having really bowed at the feet of a holy person before, it was the first moment was like, wow, what is this? And that's what it was. It was extraordinary and ordinary. I was there right at Durga Puja and then afterwards. So I was only with her once, but it was for 2 weeks. I was invited to stay inside the ashram for 2 weeks. At most of that time, there were no other Westerners there except for Krishna Das, a couple of other people coming and going for that time. But it was also the time of the celebration of the Rasa Leela, and I'm Mirabai. So the Rasa Leela is an important part of my little personal mythology. It's when Krishna danced in the moonlight with all the gopis, and he manifested himself for each of the gopis in the way that each one most desired him. That's the celebration of the Rasa Leela. And so here. And she had already told me earlier that day, by the way, that my daughter was a very great being and that she's always with me. So I had done this thing where I had snuck down to the bridge, over the little river there at Kenchi, and sprinkled a little bit of ashes, not of my child, but because her ashes had been brought to Kenchi when she died, but of another child, of another devotee. I'd sprinkled them at dawn in the river, and I didn't tell anybody. So I was having darshan that day, and she said, "What special thing happened to you this morning?" And that was when I'd had this experience of sprinkling the ashes, and the monkeys coming. 2 monkeys came and were playing as the sun was rising and the light was spilling onto the river there. And I was leaning over the bridge, and the 2 monkeys I felt like were my daughter Jenny and this other woman's son, and that they had come to play together. So I was about to tell her about the ashes and the monkeys when I remembered the amrit. I said it was delicious. Mataji pressed her hands together and beamed at me. Today was the celebration of the Rasa Leela. Siddhi Ma herself cooks pots of kheer in the ashram kitchen and sets them on the roof under the full moon, and then serves the sacred mixture to temple guests for breakfast the next day. In this moment, I felt that Mataji saw into my girlhood heart, the longing, the betrayal, the cynicism, and the poetry. My darshan was complete. A dozen other devotees, Indians and Westerners, were waiting for their chance to sit at the feet of the Mother of the Universe. Any other questions? Mataji said. Did she suffer when she died? There, that was the question that had been smoldering in the pit of my belly for 9 years. But how could this old woman who lived in a place that had been forgotten by time possibly have an answer to the complicated set of conditions that took my daughter's life, let alone address Jenny's subjective state? She died in joy, Mataji said. I bowed my head. I touched her feet. She raised my chin, looked into my eyes, and said it again. She died in joy. Thank you.